welcome to our January event. We are so excited that you're here. It is called Telling the Right Kind of Story, Storytelling as a Catalyst for Change. And we are joined today by Ophelia Wells and Craig Thomason, who I will introduce in just a few minutes. But while we wait for some more folks to join us, I'll introduce myself. My name is Lisa. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the community manager here at Cultivate and your host for today. This is a Cultivators community event, and if you are not familiar with our Cultivators community, we sure hope that you will check us out. We will share a link in the chat. It is our private Slack community where trailblazers and corporate changemakers gather to support each other, to share ideas, and to mobilize for change. So if you're not there already, we hope to see you in there real soon. And I think that is all of our logistics for today. Thank you for bearing with me. And it is now my pleasure and my privilege to welcome our two incredible guests today. I'll start with Ophelia Wells. Ophelia is a strategic operations lead in Merck's research division. Outside of her day job, Ophelia is also the founder and lead of the global podcast platform at Merck called Tealcast. Through Tealcast, Ophelia and Craig provide an audio platform and opportunity where all employees can be the storytellers of change. Prior to joining Merck, Ophelia spent time working with startup companies in the medical technology industry, where she first began cultivating her storytelling skills to turn business ideas into life-changing impact. Welcome, Ophelia. We're so excited you're here.
Excited to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, and we're also joined today, as you can see, by Craig Thomason. We are also so excited that you're here, Craig. Craig is a strategic communications lead for Merck's corporate strategy office. He is also the co-founder of Imagine, a global grassroots community recognized by Fast Company as a team that has gone above and beyond to champion a more innovative culture. Craig is a two-time TEDx speaker, an executive speaking coach, and the creative sponsor of Tealcast, Merck's first global podcast platform, which you will hear more about in just a little bit. One thing I want to say before we get started is that we had the planning meeting for this event back before the holidays. So I've had a lot of time to rant about how brilliant you both are on the Cultivate Slack, but also to really reflect on why your story and your work has been so inspiring and impactful to me already in hearing about it. And I think the way that you have taken this paradigm of how we communicate and connect in a corporate atmosphere, usually through emails and slide decks and meetings, and really infused it with intentionality and connection through podcasting and storytelling. And you've managed to take this huge global company and make it feel so connected and intentional and inclusive. And I think that's so incredible. And I'm so excited for folks to learn from you today. So with that, I would love to say hello to Ophelia and Craig. How are you today? And are you ready to talk storytelling?
Yep, I'm excited.
Hello, very excited. Always a great opportunity to talk about stories. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. I would love to start where all good stories start, with the beginning. I'd love to ask you just how you describe your work in your own words, and also maybe a little of your superhero origin story. So how did you start working together, and how did Tealcast come about? And Craig, if you would like to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I lead the strategic communications in our corporate strategy office, and I have the pleasure really of helping teams and large organizations involved in transformation initiatives to develop narratives that not only inform their audiences, but really to inspire them. When it comes to large-scale change, good communication is the last thing some organizations think about, but it's the first thing audiences experience, and that's a real shame. But what we feel is that storytelling is a key ingredient in effective communications, and often storytelling is left out completely. But really the truth is, if any transformation is going to be successful, it's going to be because of the people, not necessarily just the solution. whether it's new software or a new policy, a new procedure, even a new product. None of these things can have an impact unless people make them happen, unless people put them to use. And so I have leaders and teams employ the most powerful communication tool to help motivate people, and that's story. I think story is the well-worn path of human communication. It has, since the beginning, inspired us, educated us, entertained us, and trained us to think bigger and beyond from ourselves. And as far as an origin story, I've arrived at that viewpoint because of the grassroots community that you described called Imagine, where we take anyone from any level, anywhere in the company who have novel ideas and give them the platform to articulate them in a way where when they resonate, they give them the tools to turn them into action. So that's what I do, and that's sort of the origin story as to how I arrived there. Part of that is Tealcast. And the idea was to have just one show, one podcast to reflect the work that we were doing. And so I asked Ophelia if she could do that. And what she provided instead was beyond my wildest imagination. So she can really describe how that genesis came. But if it wasn't for her, a key piece of our ability to tell stories and inspire individuals would not be there.
Oh, thanks, Craig. So Craig described our work as inspiring change in people. For me, the words that come to mind are grassroots revolution, because that inspiration is so powerful. I mean, just before I met Craig, I was just leaving a role where I felt my voice wasn't really being heard. I had all these ideas that I thought could add value to the business, but those ideas were stifled really by, this is the way we've always done things, so keep it going. So I actually leaped at the opportunity to do an internal Shark Tank competition that Craig helped develop and became my speaker coach for. And after my pitch, Craig tapped me on the shoulder and said 2 words, "What if?" And those 2 words lit me on fire like nothing else I had encountered within the company. I mean, he really reached in and said, hey, what if we leveraged digital tools to augment how we communicate within the company? What if we did a podcast? And I said, yeah, sign me up. And that's how Tealcast was born. We figured it out from there and just took it day by day.
I love that so much. I think that the impact of that what if is so huge. And I think also, Ophelia, your willingness to put yourself out there and say, hey, I've had ideas that haven't been heard, but I'm willing to try again, is so much of that cultivator ethos that is so important to making that revolution happen. And I wonder, Ophelia, in that what if moment, like the possibility of that what if, what was it about this project in particular and working with Craig that created that possibility and excitement from that question?
I sincerely hope for those in the audience that you are so fortunate enough that you will one day be able to meet Craig in person and really experience his presence. So sorry to make you blush here for a minute, Craig, but Craig is the type of leader that will break down barriers, remove limitations to help you produce a greater impact. And he's just so masterful, I think, at helping people feel free to create or do anything. He actually told me, hey, you can do whatever you want to do. And that might sound cliche at first, but in an industry as established and regulated as the one we work in, those words in that order are very rare. And at the time, I was so hungry for innovation. So to not only feel heard, but to also help others feel that same excitement of possibility and wonder and have their voices heard as well, I leaped at that. And so Craig really helped me unleash this, creative confidence to just go out and figure out how to make an impact. No one's going to really tell you how. You're charting, uncharted territories here, but go out, figure it out. You can do it.
The power of leadership. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Craig, you talked about how when you met Ophelia, you knew she was the person to bring this, what you thought was one podcast show, to life. And it's now this global podcast platform that is streaming, I just found out, in 61 countries. 61 countries. But interestingly, Ophelia had never listened to a podcast when she started this. So what let you know that Ophelia was the person to bring this to life?
Well, to be fair, I didn't know at the time that she was not a podcast listener. I think it's funny, and she told me later on, and I laughed because it's pretty unbelievable considering what she's gone ahead and done and accomplished. When I first heard Ophelia, she was pitching in front of sharks. We have something called Teal Tank in our company, modeled after Shark Tank, where individuals look to solve some of our company's biggest problems. And senior leaders serve as sharks, and the winner, of course, and their team gets funding and the tools and the capabilities to be able to resolve those. And when I heard Ophelia pitch, I stopped in my tracks and I listened very carefully. I said, this is the person, because it is so very important for a storyteller to be able to be clear on his or her message and on their call to action for their audience. And when I heard her and saw her, I said, this is the person who can do it. And so I said, hey, listen, I wonder if you could do this. We're looking to create a podcast. We really want to create a culture of story where individuals can learn about what's happening with other employees throughout the company in a real intimate way. And you not only learn more about the projects that they're working on, but the people behind them, because I think that's what really inspires people. And so she said, great. And the next thing I knew, I didn't see a podcast, but a platform with multiple channels supporting a variety of podcasts with different themes, supporting a variety of areas. It was like asking for a show and getting, Apple Podcast platform or Spotify. It was incredible. So for me, hearing Ophelia master the ability to pitch an idea, to encourage an audience to think beyond where they are, to challenge the status quo and to move forward, this was the kind of person that we needed. So, if someone were to ask me what kind of person Ophelia is, I'd say she's fearless. She's not reckless, right? Or, she's appropriately cautious, obviously. But despite perhaps not knowing all the answers, despite not have ever hearing a podcast, despite the amount of pushback that she may have encountered, she was unafraid to step into the ambiguity and lead, and to create and to see the big picture, and more importantly, articulate it to others, because without others, Tealcast would not have been able to launch. So I think it takes someone fearless to create a safe and, more importantly, an unapologetic space to challenge the status quo, to present new ideas. And that's what Imagine is about. That's what good storytelling is about. And over the past couple of years, I've seen her really flourish as a strategic leader. So it's been great.
I love that with your own innovation, you were able to create the container kind of for others to do that as well, both of you. And I wonder, Craig, you mentioned some challenges that kind of came up, and the ability to lead when you don't have all of the answers. And I wonder, what were some challenges that you faced in bringing Tealcast to life?
Well, really, I think Ophelia owned those challenges, but some of the things that, were expressed is the technology that's, required to build a platform for ideas, a platform for compelling storytelling, and learning the technology and being able to deploy it in a way that is going to really do justice to the content that the audience is listening to. Again, it's one thing, I suppose, not ever hearing a podcast. It's quite another thing to building the platform to support it. And so that was certainly a challenge, but she was undaunted, learned the technology and began to create it from scratch. Sometimes I forget that this is a person who's a scientist, right? They've got a scientific background, and so they didn't come out from a multimedia background, but that didn't matter. I think another challenge too was being able to find people to support this vision. Again, without the people, we wouldn't have the platform and certainly not the content to go with it. And so her ability to articulate something that had never been done before in our company, we've had podcasts, but a platform, one in which it was for employees by employees, well, that was a big sell. And so what she was able to do was to articulate that in a way to share the benefits, not only as to what the company would experience, but who contributed towards it. And I think that's been part of the success in large part for Tealcast. So those were some of the challenges that she faced, and that's how she overcame them. And I just had the pleasure of kind of sitting back and watching and providing input wherever I could. But seeing her go has been just inspiring, to say the least.
We were discussing the importance of people and making sure that you have that groundswell and you have that support of your peers and colleagues so that you can move your ideas forward. And you both work with a number of volunteers who have other roles within the company, other responsibilities. How do you find those folks? How do you motivate them to keep coming back once you've found them? What does that look like? And Ophelia, I'd love to start with you if you're open to sharing.
Yeah, sure. I think personally, I think it's the opportunity to be part of what feels like endless possibility, and to step outside of the silo of your day job and impact a broader company in new ways. That's extremely exciting, certainly for me and for many of our volunteers. But in particular, that comes to mind, he's one of our podcast producers. He leads our diversity and inclusion podcast while working in vaccine sales by day. And I saw his passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so connecting across the company through the podcast, we've been able to help him evolve that passion for improving DEI from just podcasting to now internal consulting, where he's now helping leaders across different business units develop and implement specific DEI strategies fit for their business and using storytelling in the process. So, I think I mentioned earlier how Craig helped me unleash my inner creative confidence. So seeing that same thing happen for all of our volunteers has certainly been rewarding.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. One of the things that we invited employees to think about is, what is it that you see that could make a difference in our company? Everyone has ideas. And thinking about the work from Rita McGrath, she always talks about change and how companies in leadership are at the center of things. But she talks about how the snow melts from the edges. And when change is taking place, and change is always taking place, it's those who are at the periphery or at the front lines who really see it. And so providing for them an opportunity then to amplify not only what they see, but what they think should be done, really, I think, gives people an incentive to get involved. And so they may not necessarily be the one with the answer, but they certainly don't mind helping the ones who do have it by becoming volunteers and helping them become better storytellers, or for them to employ a new mindset of thinking, like design thinking for solving problems. So I think that in many companies, everyone has ideas, but because of circumstances, we may not have the opportunity to act on them. Here, we have an opportunity to not only hear the ideas of others, but help amplify them and turn them into action and really truly make a difference. One that's sponsored and sanctioned by the company and giving people a full opportunity to be their creative best. So I think that's really given people a huge incentive to move forward and do that, despite having many responsibilities in their day job.
I like the idea that everyone has something to offer too, that you were saying, like, you might be able to bring design thinking, you might want to run a show. And I think that is so powerful, the way that you're able to seek out those folks and also see what it is they have to bring to that table and contribute. And I know we framed the event around storytelling, so I certainly want to focus a little bit on that for a moment. And a lot of your work, both with Imagine and with Tealcast, has focused on that culture of storytelling that you mentioned earlier, Craig. What do you think makes what are the elements of a compelling story? What makes a story compelling?
Well, maybe that'll be the subject too for another conversation at another time, because I think we could really go to town with that. But I'll just focus on one piece. There are many people in the world who identify with a wizard or with heroes from Wakanda or a Wonder Woman. And while we may never become those individuals, and certainly we may never meet them, we identify with them because the challenges that they face are very, very realistic to us. And the reason for that is because the author recognizes in us as an audience our own inner struggles and challenges. So what I think makes storytelling so compelling is when a creator is able to understand their audience and deliver a message that resonates with them, one so much that your story becomes theirs. And I think that in a corporate setting, you may have someone with an idea that may seem as fantastic as fiction. But if you know your audience well, you can deliver it in a way that resonates with them, that answers questions that they may have, that perhaps allays some fears that they may be feeling, or amplifies some thoughts that they've had in the past but wasn't sure if they were all alone, by speaking in a manner in which the audience can appreciate. So I think what makes a good storyteller is one who really understands their audience. And there's a lot of great information about how to do that, but I'll just give one quick exercise that anyone could do to employ this that might be helpful, if that's okay. All right. So there's a woman named Patty Sanchez, great communicator. She works with a woman named Nancy Duarte for a company called Duarte. So if you're into communications, you know, they're like the best. And so what she did is she said, you know, before you communicate with your audience, I want you to think about where they are today, how they feel about your idea, what they think of your idea, and how they act in response to it. Then I want you to think about in this next column where you want them to go, right? So here they are today with how they feel, what they think, and what they do, but here's where you want them to go with it. And then the third column is how you're going to get them there. So that really puts the onus on you as the author, as the speaker, as the communicator, to really understand what's at stake for this audience. What keeps them up at night? What is it that they need? What are their interests? How they might respond to your message, and then craft it in a way that's going to bring them from where they are to where you want them to be. So if it's a business meeting, understand how your audience feels right now about a particular subject, how you want them to feel afterwards. What kind of messaging are you going to use? Take what they're thinking about a particular subject right now and think about what you want them to think about. And maybe that requires for you to really explain yourself in a way that they never thought about before, or help them to understand that progress is being made and that they can have full confidence that the project is going where it should. And finally, and most importantly, after every communication, you should really want your audience to do something with the message, and that's action. So team, because of where we are today, my recommendation is that we do this, right? And so now they know what to do with it. And so when you read Wonder Woman, or when you watch Black Panther, or if you're a Harry Potter fan or a Star Wars fan, there's always a call to action for the hero. And people identify with what that is. And usually it's overcoming insurmountable odds by looking within yourself. So if we can speak that way to our audience, that this is not just my story, but yours, and your contribution will bring out a successful outcome, well, now I want to become a part of this. So I think it's knowing your audience and really speaking to them in a way that inspires them is what makes great storytelling.
You know, I've had the privilege of being in one of Craig's workshops, and every time he speaks, I still learn something new. So hopefully for those in the audience, hopefully you'll have that privilege one day. You know, the greatest lessons I've learned from Craig is how to get to understand your audience, what they care about. And I think oftentimes for some in the corporate world, there's a disconnect between story and data. Yet what we found through podcasting is that's not the case at all. You know, as an engineer by training, I get very excited by data analytics. So the data analytics behind Tealcast, you know, is something I look at regularly, but I also get to see how a compelling story translates into impact across a company through that data, both quantitative and qualitative. And one thing we've seen clearly in the data so far is that what's compelling to one audience may not be compelling to another. So, quick example, there were 2 podcasts. One was about an employee who works within communities impacted by HIV. And he shared how he leverages his authenticity and his lived experiences as a Black gay man to make an impact in healthcare and in the fight against HIV. That podcast to this day has the highest number of listeners of any of the 90 plus podcasts we published. Now, on another podcast, a senior leader in the company, he's actually now our chief strategy officer, he shared his story, a very personal story of his upbringing as a child and where he grew up and how his early life decisions ultimately impacted his leadership style and what that style is today. Now, while that podcast did not get a particularly large number of listeners, of those who did listen in, the vast majority were senior leaders, including our executive team. So the data showed that through different ways of storytelling, we can tap into specific audiences and keep them engaged.
Absolutely. And one thing that I just thought of as you were talking about that, Ophelia, was the fact that as a communicator, we're really in service to our audience, because without our audience, our idea will go no further than our lips. Okay? So if we haven't learned how to connect with our audience, we can't expect movement, right? Maybe, we're in a position where that's got to be the outcome because, that's our role. But it's not going to be the kind of response that would be better if it was done in a way that resonates with the audience. So, sometimes we hear about this, and I know this was a question that you had, Lisa. So my apologies for skipping a bit ahead, but sometimes people say, hey, listen, my audience, they're all about data. They don't want stories, they want data. I get it, because data is the truth. But it's hard sometimes to move people just with data alone. And so if a person says, well, the data speaks for itself, well, actually data doesn't unless we give it a voice. So if you're looking at a chart and there's this big, drop, the boss is going to raise her hand and she's going to say, what happened? That's the story, right? There are people behind the numbers that you're sharing with your audience. And so it's important to highlight an example of a trend and the person who it's affecting, because that may be the difference between whether or not we make a decision, based on this trend, right? So while data is so very important, you can tell data stories, if you will. Remember, it's the people behind them that really helps us to influence decision-making, and that it won't speak unless we give it a voice. And while we've had data around a number of things, even racial disparity in this country, we've seen it for decades. It wasn't until a story out of Minnesota that resonated with people to begin to move them into a greater dialogue about race relations. So I think when we come to that conclusion, then we're able to find this nice balance between data and giving the voice that it requires in order to get people to move.
I love the way you both framed it, because it's helpful for me as well, because I think oftentimes, and I hear this from other folks too, you can get into that idea that stories and data are binary options and they exist on opposite ends of the scale and they are not friends and they can't ever be friends. And I think the way that you both talked about the importance of having the data and also not making the data stand alone, but wrapping it in that story and being able to personalize it and show that impact and draw folks in. Like Ophelia was saying, sometimes with multiple stories are needed to draw folks into different points is really incredible and powerful and beautiful. So thank you both for that. And I think we will stick to chat questions just by nature of kind of keeping the ship running. So if folks have questions for Craig and Ophelia, please go ahead and put them into chat. And I would love to ask you both a question. we are now heading into year 3 of the global pandemic. And I know that as the pandemic began, Craig, you were really focused on in-person events, and Ophelia, you were just getting Tealcast off the ground. So I wonder if you can talk about, and maybe we'll start with you, Ophelia, how has the pandemic impacted your work? And are there any changes that came out of it that surprised you?
Yeah, it was funny. I actually remember right at the start of it, we were interviewing our chief diversity officer, and we were scheduled to meet in person at her office here in Pennsylvania. And she called and said, everything's shutting down. I can't meet in person. We have to go by WebEx. We logged onto the WebEx, everything crashed. And now we're trying to figure out, how do we get this done? And I remember talking to Craig afterwards, and he said, I think this is the perfect timing for podcasts. It's about to have a much bigger stage within this company. And moving to a largely virtual lifestyle actually helped me connect with colleagues I would have never had the opportunity to connect with otherwise, from Australia to Saudi Arabia to Hong Kong. You know, there were so many people actively reaching out and seeking those creative ways to communicate in a now digital world. And, you know, funny enough, our company did not have a global podcast platform prior to the pandemic. So suddenly Tealcast became an IT solution as well that, you know, really enabled strategic communications and new connections across many countries. So, you know, I would say the impact is, I never would have guessed that the platform would have grown so broadly this quickly. And it's because of this now need to adopt a new way of working and connect virtually. So we're looking to see how we can continue to broaden in 2022.
Yeah, thank goodness for Ophelia. It was so very important to support her even more during the pandemic, because we recognized this was really going to be one of our main drivers, to have that discussion around creativity and innovation in our company. When we stopped doing live events, sure, we went on to remote platforms and had people present, and that was fine. But, you know, in order to really have that effect that we would have in person, we took a different approach. You know, stories are resilient. They will always do what they're supposed to do if we do them right. And so what I began doing was looking to see what platforms like TED was doing. And they were starting to create these little films where people were speaking from their home or other locations and talking about their ideas, and they would cut in footage underscoring what those ideas were, whether it was just B-roll footage or something real. And you almost felt like you were watching a little film. I said, that's it. That's what we're doing next. And so our participants, our speakers, many of whom were scientists, they were up for the challenge. And so we had equipment sent to them, and it's not hard, right, to create good films these days with the technology that we have. We coached them through it, gave them the instructions. And then what I had for the first time was an opportunity to contribute to a talk in a way that I never had, and that is providing footage and images, such that you could actually experiencing it as it was being narrated. And so it was such a sheer delight to now see these little tiny films, the powerful ones of individuals speaking their truth and seeing it in a way that we had never imagined before. So I'm quite thankful for that opportunity now, because we know that we have that as an opportunity in the future to show these small films, if you will, with these ideas. And these individuals who I don't think ever would have done this if we hadn't asked them, but then they took it to the next level in a way that surprised even me, and has been quite successful and a great teaching tool as well.
I wonder if, in the context of the pandemic, all this change, and also all of the changes we're seeing in the workplace in general, between work from home and the Great Resignation and all of that, do either of you have thoughts on just maybe where we're going? Do you think this is a time for change? What do you think will come out of this unstable but innovative kind of time in the world? I know that's a big question.
It is. I do think it's a perfect time for change. You know, it's remember sitting down with, you know, some of my managers and, you know, the coworkers, and I literally remember these words. If you really want to accelerate, you need to be in person, on site, with the team, in the office. And fast forward, you know, I think from when those words were said, it was probably not even 6 months to now we have to completely rethink how we thought work needed to look and careers needed to look. You know, it actually reminds me of one of my favorite podcasts we've done thus far. We had the great fortune of doing podcasts with our outgoing CEO and our incoming CEO in what was, you know, an historic transition in many ways. And so for the outgoing CEO at the time, you know, he had accomplished so much. So I asked him the question, how do you continue to lead confidently through all of this uncertainty, right? In the heart of the pandemic at the time when I asked this, and through all of the challenges we were currently facing. And he looked at me and said, I don't always lead confidently. It may appear that way, but I have insecurities too. And he shared how he overcomes all these challenges day in and day out on a very personal and human level. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes, to get back to your question, Lisa, was he was talking about, you know, how he didn't have prior experience for certain jobs, but he took those roles anyway and leaned in and, you know, leveraged the experience he did have to make a positive impact. So he said, there's something better than knowledge. It's called learning. That mindset of evolving as you go, learning as you go, figuring it out as you go, you know, I think just reigns true of not only the last 2 years, but what's to come in the future as well. And so, you know, him opening up about his mindset throughout his career, now, you know, funny, I think is really timely, right? In a way for us to listen up and think, we don't know what's coming, but we can continue to learn and evolve and grow.
I always say, we don't know the future, but I think we can influence it. I think if we have a platform, if we have a space, if we have a culture that can balance between what is and what could be, and take steps into influencing what is possible, I think we don't have to wait for the future to happen. I think we can influence it. I think the pandemic has taught us, many of us, that, you know, some of the things that people thought were just for show or kind of trendy, really, had we embraced it stronger or more fully, we would have been much further ahead, like this platform, right? We're using Teams or Slack. Those were things that, you know, some people really didn't take hold of, but others did. And now we see the benefit of it. So my view on the Great Resignation and the change that's taking place and the unprecedented shift in working, it will continue, is that don't just experience it, but influence it in a way that's going to benefit you so that you can navigate through it. Walk on the board of what is and what could be. Step into the ambiguity, and you will be surprised as to what the outcome could be, and really leverage those technologies. The power of innovation and the power of story is resilient. It's not going anywhere. It's the way we actually amplify it is what we need to do is change. And if we do, I think we'll be in a good position.
What you said, I think of Octavia Butler's work and her quotes around shaping change and being able to take what comes and kind of shape it towards a better future. So I love what both of you shared. And I want to get to a question from chat from Dorothy. Thank you for your question, who asks, do you have any advice for someone who is just entering the innovation space? Advice on how to get started building those storytelling skills, etc. And I know you shared an exercise, Craig, but do either of you have any advice for Dorothy?
I'll let Craig kick that off. I'll go after you.
I think my advice would be is to start small and really lean into this philosophy. Don't follow your passion, find something to punch, okay? And what I mean by that is there are problems and challenges that people face every day that they literally would like to punch, right? And I want you to be able to find those things and to focus on how you can resolve those things, because that's where people begin to see value in what you do. And so there are a variety of platforms that you can use to identify what people want to punch the most. And in so doing, you will not only find out what will resonate the most with your audience, but likely garner support from them to help you do it. But if you come from an outside with an idea that might be a little esoteric or something that really doesn't resonate with people, it's not part of their story, it's going to be a lot harder. Start small, find something you want to punch, as my friend Natalie Molina Nino would say, and then you'll garner the support that you need to be able to overcome it. And the more you do that, the more traction you'll make, and the more stories you tell around that, the broader your platform will become.
I love that quote. I have to borrow that quote. But, you know, to piggyback on something Craig said earlier around feeling comfortable with ambiguity, really being able to thrive in ambiguity, I think one thing that helped me get there starting out and trying to innovate and trying to drive change was there are problems that people around you, Dorothy, I'm not sure if you're, you know, working in a large company or what have you, but there are often going to be problems that people around you perceive as problems. And then there are going to be things that they wish would change, but they don't necessarily know who that person is or what that could look like or what the outcome should be. And usually in that gray space, there's going to be something that really irritates you so much and something that only personally annoys you that will continue to motivate you to change it. You know, for me, it was not being heard and seeing others who had other great ideas and them not being heard. That really bothered me, and that continues to be my motivation today. I don't want to ever see anyone voiceless or feel stifled. So even when it's a day job on top of a side gig, on top of a, you know, next level hustle, I can continue to push forward and really progress in whatever that thing is. So hopefully you'll find whatever that thing is that really bothers you in this sea of ambiguity.
Thank you for your question, Dorothy, and thank you for that answer. I think there is something I really appreciate about the cultivator ethos of change making is that you have to not only seek the thing that could change, but you have to really have that depth of care to be the one to try to change it or be involved with the folks who are trying to change it already. And I think that's something that you both obviously exhibit in spades and spades. And I thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your stories with us so generously and thoughtfully. Are there any closing thoughts that you want to make sure folks take away with them or that you wanted to share and didn't get to before we go?
I just had one huge thank you to you, Lisa, the entire Cultivate team, and especially to Craig for introducing me. And, you know, I certainly didn't get to where I am today, you know, without amazing people really being there to help me. And Craig is one of those amazing people. So extremely thankful. And the one thing I hope people take away is you can figure out whatever it is. You might not have ever listened to a podcast before or had experience in doing something before. You can figure it out. And hopefully once you get to a great place, reach back and help others. But thank you all.
I can only echo by saying I'm grateful for Ophelia. It's quite an interesting thing to find someone who really has the courage to make things happen. We talk a lot about, you know, talent, very important, skill, experience. You can have all those things, but if you lack courage, you're not going anywhere. And so Ophelia's courageous leadership in creating this space, I think, has been so key And now we see that it's thriving. It's kind of easy to take for granted. I think that's an important quality for all cultivators, is to have the courage to continue to keep coming day after day. You're cultivating a crop. You have to come day after day, and sometimes it doesn't look like it's supposed to be, it's not doing what you want it to be doing, but over time it will. So my closing words, continue in your day-to-day jobs to create that safe and, most importantly, unapologetic space to ask what if, to challenge the status quo, and to amplify the ideas of your colleagues to help move your company forward. I think that's how we're going to be successful, especially during this time.
Just going to give folks a moment to absorb all of it.
Yeah, I got to absorb that last one. That was powerful, Craig.
All of it. I think I started writing down your quotes part of the way through and had to stop and just listen to the replay later, because so much of what both of you said was reminders that I need to like post all over my office for every single day. So again, thank you so much for being here. In the research for this event, I came across a quote by a researcher and psychologist, Ophelia Lottie, and she said, "We could say the future is first an idea, a story that we tell each other." And I just want to thank you both for your tireless, innovative, incredible, kind work in creating a better future for all of us by creating more space for more folks to be heard. So thank you so much for being here. Folks, we hope to see you in the cultivators community on Slack. I will share that link one more time. And thank you for bearing with us as we moved through our Zoom bomb experience. We're so grateful to you all for being here, and we will see you soon. Stay curious, cultivators. We'll see you around Slack.